The sound of gunfire crackled in the distance as Zara Blackwood ducked behind the weathered barrel outside the saloon, her heart hammering against her ribs like a blacksmith's anvil. The year was 1878, and Silver Creek, Colorado, was just another dusty frontier town caught between civilization and lawlessness, a place where fortunes were made and lives were lost with equal indifference. "This is your last warning, Miss Blackwood." Sheriff Tanner's voice boomed from across the street. "Hand over those documents, or I can't guarantee your safety when Harrington's men arrive." Zara clutched the leather satchel tighter to her chest, the evidence of corruption within its folds worth more than gold in these parts. At 26, she'd seen enough injustice to last several lifetimes, first as a newspaper publisher's daughter back east, and now as the unexpected owner of Silver Creek's only newspaper after her father's suspicious death 3 months prior. "I'd rather die standing than live on my knees, Sheriff." She called back, her voice steadier than she felt. The people deserve to know the truth. The thunder of approaching hooves drew her attention to the end of the street. A lone rider appeared through the haze of dust, tall in the saddle, his face obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. He rode with the easy confidence of a man who knew the land and its dangers intimately, guiding his chestnut stallion directly between Zara and the sheriff's posse. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the dirt. When he turned, Zara found herself staring into the most piercing blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face that had clearly seen its share of hardship. "Seems to me," he drawled, loud enough for everyone to hear, "that 5 men against 1 woman ain't exactly sporting, Sheriff." Sheriff Tanner's face reddened. "This ain't your fight, Drifter. Move along if you know what's good for you." The stranger merely smiled, revealing a small dimple in his right cheek. "I've never been particularly good at knowing what's good for me." He turned slightly toward Zara, his eyes never leaving the sheriff. "Madam, I'm Heath Calloway. Might I suggest we continue this conversation somewhere less exposed to lead poisoning?" Zara hesitated only a moment before nodding. This stranger was her only chance of escape, and sometimes survival meant taking risks. "I'd be much obliged, Mr. Calloway." With a movement so quick it seemed almost casual, Heath drew his revolver and fired a shot that splintered the wooden post directly above Sheriff Tanner's head. In the ensuing confusion, he helped Zara onto his horse, swinging up behind her with remarkable agility for a man of his size. "Hold tight," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as they galloped out of town, the sound of pursuit fading behind them. They rode hard for nearly an hour, following a stream that wound its way into the foothills. Heath guided his horse with expert precision, taking routes that would be difficult to track. Finally, they reached a small cabin nestled among ponderosa pines, almost invisible until they were upon it. "My temporary lodgings," Heath explained as he helped her dismount. "Not fancy, but it's defendable." Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a narrow bed in the corner and a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs occupying the center of the single room. A rifle stood propped by the door, and various supplies were neatly organized on shelves along the back wall. Heath busied himself building a fire while Zara stood awkwardly, still clutching her satchel. "You can set that down, Miss Blackwood. Whatever's in there has already caused enough trouble for one day." Zara's eyes narrowed. "How do you know my name?" Heath glanced up from the kindling, amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. "Small towns have big ears." "I've been in Silver Creek for 3 days, which is plenty of time to hear about the troublesome newspaper woman who's been asking too many questions about Harrington Mining Company. And yet you helped me." "Why?" he shrugged, striking a match. "Let's just say I've got my reasons to dislike men who hide behind badges and money." The fire caught, casting dancing shadows across his face. "Now, care to tell me what was worth risking your life for?" Zara hesitated, then opened the satchel and spread several documents on the table. Financial records, deeds, and letters proving that Judge Harrington and Sheriff Tanner have been forcing ranchers off their land by manipulating water rights. They've been poisoning streams, redirecting water flow, then buying the worthless land for pennies on the dollar once the ranchers are desperate. Heath studied the papers, his expression darkening. And the silver vein discovered last month runs right through these properties. You know about that. I make it my business to know things. He looked up, his eyes intense. Your father's death wasn't an accident, was it? Zara felt tears threatening and blinked them back fiercely. The official report says he was drunk and fell down the stairs of the newspaper office. My father hadn't touched a drop of alcohol since before I was born. Heath nodded, as if confirming something to himself. I'm sorry about your father, Miss Blackwood. Good men are scarce in these territories. Please call me Zara. She took a deep breath. Mr. Calloway, Heath, he corrected gently. Heath. I appreciate your help today, but I can't involve you any further. These men are dangerous. He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Danger and I are old acquaintances, Zara. Besides, you've already involved me by accepting my help. Harrington won't distinguish between us now. Zara studied him more carefully. His clothes were quality, though Trail wore a dark blue shirt under a leather vest, denim pants tucked into well-used boots. His gun belt sat low on his hips, the revolver's worn grip suggesting frequent use. But it was the quiet confidence in his manner that intrigued her most. You're not just a drifter, are you? Heath regarded her for a long moment. No, madam, I'm not. I work for the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Your father contacted us shortly before his death with concerns about corruption in Silver Creek. I was sent to investigate. Zara's heart leaped. Then you can help me expose them officially. It's not that simple, Heath cautioned. We need more evidence, witnesses willing to testify. What you have here is compelling but not conclusive. He paused. And frankly, I'm more concerned with keeping you alive right now. As if in response to his words, a distant sound caught their attention, horses approaching. They've found us faster than I expected, Heath muttered, immediately moving to extinguish the fire. Grab only what you need. We're leaving. Zara quickly gathered the documents while Heath collected supplies and ammunition. Within minutes, they were slipping out the back of the cabin and into the deepening twilight. They led the horse through a narrow ravine, moving as quietly as possible. Heath's hand occasionally brushed Zara's lower back, guiding her through the darkness. Each touch sent an unexpected warmth through her body despite the tense circumstances. There's an old mining cabin about 4 miles west, he whispered. We can shelter there for the night. The journey was arduous in the darkness, but Heath moved with the surety of someone who had navigated treacherous terrain before. When they finally reached the abandoned cabin, it was well past midnight. The structure was little more than 3 walls and part of a roof, but it offered some protection from the elements and prying eyes. It's not much, Heath apologized as he spread his bedroll on the dirt floor. It's better than a jail cell, Zara replied, attempting humor despite her exhaustion. Heath smiled. That's certainly true, he hesitated. Take the bedroll, I'll keep watch. Don't be ridiculous, you need rest too. Zara settled herself on one side of the bedroll. There's room enough to share, and I trust you're a gentleman. Something flickered in Heath's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or respect. As the lady wishes, he said softly, lowering himself beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. They lay in silence for a while, the night sounds of the wilderness surrounding them. Zara found herself acutely aware of his presence, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the faint scent of leather and pine that clung to him. You're brave, Heath said suddenly. Most people would have handed over those documents at the first sign of trouble. My father taught me that truth matters above all else, Zara replied. He believed in justice, in doing what's right even when it's difficult. She paused. Especially when it's difficult. Your father sounds like a good man. He was. Zara felt the familiar ache of loss. What about your family? Heath was quiet for so long that Zara thought he might have fallen asleep. My father was a Texas Ranger, he finally said. He died trying to protect a family from cattle rustlers when I was 15. My mother passed 2 years later. Grief, the doctor said, though I think it was more that she simply lost her will to continue without him. I'm sorry, Zara whispered. It was a long time ago. His voice held no self-pity, just a simple acknowledgement of fact. But it taught me something important, that there are things worth fighting for, worth dying for even: justice, truth, family. He turned his head slightly toward her. I think your father understood that too. Zara felt tears slip down her cheeks. Heath reached out hesitantly, his calloused thumb gently brushing away a tear. You should rest, he said softly. Tomorrow will be another long day. Despite her racing thoughts, exhaustion soon claimed Zara. Just before sleep took her completely, she felt Heath's arm settle protectively across her waist. And for the first time since her father's death, she felt truly safe. Morning came with a soft golden light filtering through the deteriorating roof. Zara woke to find herself alone on the bedroll, the space beside her cold. For a moment, panic gripped her. Had Heath abandoned her? Had he been captured? The sound of quiet movement outside reassured her. She emerged from the cabin to find Heath tending to his horse, the animal nuzzling affectionately at his shoulder. Good morning, he greeted, a smile warming his features. I was beginning to think you might sleep the day away. What time is it? Heath pulled out a silver pocket watch. Just past 7. I've scouted the area, no sign of pursuit, but that doesn't mean they've given up. What's our next move? Heath secured his saddle before answering. There's a ranch about 10 miles north of here. The owner, Zachariah Jackson, is an honest man with no love for Harrington or his cronies. We can seek temporary shelter there while I send a telegraph to my superiors. They set off after a simple breakfast of jerky and hardtack. The day warmed quickly as they rode, Heath sitting behind Zara, his arms encircling her as he held the reins. The proximity was both comforting and distracting. Zara found herself increasingly aware of the solid strength of his chest against her back, the gentle pressure of his thighs alongside hers. May I ask you something personal? She ventured after they had ridden in companionable silence for some time. You can ask. Can't promise I'll answer. How does someone become a Pinkerton detective? It seems an unusual profession. Heath chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest and into her back. It wasn't exactly planned. After my parents died, I spent a few years drifting, taking odd jobs, sometimes riding with cattle drives, got into my share of trouble. He paused. During one particularly memorable saloon brawl in Kansas City, I apparently impressed a Pinkerton agent with my, persuasive abilities. You mean fighting, among other skills. I was good at reading people, spotting lies, had a decent poker face myself. The agent offered me a job as an operative, and it suited me, gave me purpose, a chance to make a difference. Do you ever get lonely, always moving, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots? Heath was silent for several moments. I suppose I've never thought about it much. It's just the way my life is. Something in his tone made Zara think there was more he wasn't saying, but she didn't press. Everyone had their secrets, their private wounds. They reached the Jackson Ranch by early afternoon. The property was modest, but well-maintained, a sturdy 2-story farmhouse, a large barn, and several outbuildings surrounded by fields where cattle grazed. A tall man with iron-gray hair and a full beard emerged from the barn as they approached, a shotgun held casually but noticeably in his hands. That's far enough, he called. Heath raised one hand in a peaceful gesture. Mr. Jackson, my name is Heath Calloway. I believe you knew Joseph Blackwood. The man's eyes narrowed. I did. Good man. What's it to you? This is his daughter, Zara. We're seeking temporary sanctuary. Jackson's gaze shifted to Zara, his expression softening slightly. You look like him around the eyes. He lowered the shotgun. Heard about what happened to your pa. Never believed that nonsense about him being drunk. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, Zara said. My father spoke highly of you. Come on in then, Jackson said, gesturing toward the house. The missus just put on a fresh pot of coffee. Inside, they were greeted warmly by Martha Jackson, a sturdy woman with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. She immediately set about preparing a proper meal while Zachariah listened to their story. Can't say I'm surprised, the rancher said when they'd finished. Harrington's been squeezing folks out for years. 3 of my neighbors lost their land last spring when their cattle started dying mysteriously. Water supply was tainted but couldn't prove who did it. Would they be willing to testify? Heath asked. Jackson shook his head. 2 of them moved back east, the third. He paused. Well, Jenkins wasn't the same after losing everything, took his own life a month later. Zara felt sick. How many others have suffered because of these men? Too many, Martha said quietly, setting plates of roast beef and potatoes before them. Eat now, you'll need your strength. After the meal, Jackson offered to ride into the nearest town with telegraph service so Heath could contact his superiors. Best if you two stay put, the rancher advised. Harrington's got eyes everywhere, but no one will think twice about me making a supply run. With Jackson gone, Martha showed them to a small guest room. You'll have to share, I'm afraid. Other bedrooms being repaired after the roof leaked last month. We'll manage, thank you, Heath assured her, ignoring Zara's slightly flushed cheeks. Left alone, they sorted through the documents again, organizing them and discussing strategy. As the afternoon wore on, Martha brought them fresh coffee and homemade bread, insisting they take a break. How long have you been running the newspaper, dear? She asked Zara. Only since father died. Before that, I helped with editing and some of the writing. Father insisted I learn every aspect of the business. Zara smiled at the memory. He scandalized half the town by teaching me to set type and operate the press, said a woman should be able to make her own way in the world. Sounds like a progressive man, Heath commented. He was. My mother died when I was 12 and father raised me alone. He never remarried, said I was handful enough. Her smile turned wistful. He encouraged my education when most girls my age were learning needlepoint. Sent me to a women's college back east. That explains a lot, Heath said with a small smile. What does that mean? Just that most women I've encountered wouldn't stand up to a corrupt sheriff with nothing but determination and a satchel full of papers. Martha watched their exchange with knowing eyes. I'll leave you two to your work, she said, heading for the door. Supper will be ready at 6. As the day progressed into evening, Zara found herself increasingly distracted by Heath's presence. The way he pushed his hair back when deep in thought, the occasional half-smile that appeared when she made a particularly astute observation, the surprising gentleness of his hands as they worked together, all of it combined to create a confusing whirl of emotions she hadn't expected. Jackson returned shortly before sunset, bringing news that the telegraph had been sent and a reply was expected within a day. Also brought these, he said, setting a bundle on the table. Clothes for the both of you. Figure you might need a change after being on the run. Dinner was a pleasant affair, with Martha's excellent cooking and Jackson's stories about the early days of the territory providing a welcome distraction from their troubles. As they sat around the fire afterward, Zara found herself studying Heath's profile in the flickering light. There was something about him that drew her, not just his obvious physical appeal, but a depth of character that showed in his quiet competence and unwavering sense of justice. When they finally retired to their shared room, an awkward tension filled the air. The single bed seemed much smaller than it had earlier. I'll sleep on the floor, Heath offered immediately. Don't be ridiculous, Zara said, echoing her words from the previous night. The bed is plenty big enough for both of us. Heath raised an eyebrow. Are you always this practical, Miss Blackwood? When necessary, Mr. Calloway. She turned her back to him. Now if you'll excuse me, I'd like to change. She heard him chuckle softly as he moved to face the wall, giving her privacy. Zara quickly changed into the simple cotton nightgown Martha had provided, acutely aware of Heath's presence just a few feet away. You can turn around now, she said when she was decent. Heath had removed his vest and boots, but remained otherwise clothed. He settled onto one side of the bed, carefully maintaining distance between them. Good night, Zara, he said softly. Good night, Heath. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Zara. She lay awake, listening to Heath's steady breathing, wondering if he was equally unable to rest. The events of the past 2 days replayed in her mind: the confrontation with Sheriff Tanner, Heath's timely intervention, their narrow escape. It all seemed surreal, like something from one of the dime novels sold at the general store. You're thinking so loudly I can almost hear the words. Heath's voice came quietly through the darkness. Zara turned to face him, finding his eyes open, watching her. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to keep you awake. You didn't. I was just lying here wondering how a newspaper woman from Silver Creek ended up on the run with a Pinkerton detective. Life takes unexpected turns, I suppose. Zara hesitated. Can I ask you something? Another personal question. There was amusement in his voice. Yes. Have you ever been in love? The silence that followed was so long that Zara began to regret the question. Just as she was about to apologize, Heath spoke. Once. Her name was Rebecca. I was 22, still new to the Pinkerton agency. She was the daughter of a banker I was assigned to protect. His voice was low, reflective. She was beautiful, educated, refined, everything I wasn't. What happened? What usually happens when people from different worlds try to bridge the gap. Her father objected. She eventually agreed with him that a nomadic detective with no prospects wasn't suitable husband material. There was no bitterness in his tone, just a matter of fact acceptance. She married a lawyer from St. Louis last I heard. I'm sorry, don't be, it was for the best. This life I lead doesn't leave room for the kind of stability a woman like Rebecca needed. He paused. What about you? Has some fortunate man claimed your heart? Zara smiled into the darkness. There was a journalism student at college who fancied himself in love with me. He proposed with flowery words and grand promises, but there was something insincere about him, as if he was reciting lines from a play rather than speaking from his heart. Wise of you to recognize the difference, Heath murmured. Perhaps. Or perhaps I was simply too focused on my studies and my future to give love a proper chance. She sighed. Father always said I was too practical for my own good. There's nothing wrong with practicality. It's kept you alive this far. Yes, but is survival enough? Don't we all deserve something more connection, passion, purpose beyond mere existence? Heath was quiet for a moment. Those are dangerous questions, Zara Blackwood. Why dangerous? Because they make a man consider possibilities he's long since dismissed. His voice had dropped to a near whisper. Because they make the practical path seem suddenly hollow. The air between them seemed charged with unspoken feelings. Zara was acutely aware of how close they were, how easy it would be to reach across the small space separating them. We should try to sleep, Heath said finally, his voice returning to its normal tone. Tomorrow may bring new challenges. Yes, of course, Zara agreed, though sleep felt more impossible than ever. She turned away from him, her mind whirling with confused emotions. This was madness developing feelings for a man she'd known barely 2 days, a man whose life was entirely different from hers, a man who would likely disappear once this crisis was resolved. Yet there was something between them, something undeniable and powerful. Morning brought clear skies, and a message from Town Heath superiors had responded. A federal marshal was being dispatched from Denver with the authority to investigate the corruption allegations, but it would take at least 3 days for him to arrive. 3 days, Zara repeated, pacing the kitchen. What are we supposed to do for 3 days while Harrington and his men search for us? Stay put and stay alive, Heath replied calmly. This is the safest place for now. I hate hiding, she muttered. It feels like we're letting them win. Heath caught her arm gently as she passed him. This isn't surrender, Zara, it's strategy. Sometimes you have to retreat temporarily to win the larger battle. The sincerity in his eyes calmed her somewhat. You're right, of course, I just feel so helpless. You're many things, Zara Blackwood, but helpless isn't one of them. His hand lingered on her arm a moment longer than necessary before he released her. The Jacksons were generous hosts, insisting that Zara and Heath make themselves at home. To keep busy, Zara helped Martha with household tasks while Heath assisted Zachariah with ranch work. The normalcy of these activities provided a strange comfort amid the uncertainty of their situation. That evening, after another hearty meal, they gathered on the porch to enjoy the cool night air. Martha brought out a fiddle, surprising Zara with her skill as she played traditional tunes while Zachariah tapped his foot in accompaniment. Do you dance, Mr. Calloway? Martha asked with a twinkle in her eye. Heath looked momentarily discomfited. It's been some time, madam. Nonsense. Some things you don't forget. She nudged her husband, who took the fiddle and began playing a waltz. Go on now, show Miss Blackwood that you haven't forgotten all your social graces in your adventuring. Zara felt a flutter of anticipation as Heath stood and extended his hand to her. Miss Blackwood, would you do me the honor? She placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her to a clear area of the porch. His right hand settled at her waist while his left held hers with surprising gentleness. As they began to move to the music, Zara was impressed by his grace. "You dance very well for a man who claims to be out of practice," she observed. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "My mother insisted I learn, said even cowboys should know how to behave in civilized company. She was a wise woman. She was." His eyes held Zara's as they moved in perfect rhythm. "She would have liked you." "Why do you say that?" She admired strength, independence, and she had little patience for pretense or falsehood. His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "You remind me of her in some ways." Zara wasn't sure if being compared to his mother was a compliment, but the warmth in Heath's eyes suggested it was meant as one. As they danced, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, the pressure of his hand at her waist, the slight calluses she could feel against her palm, the faint scent of soap and leather that surrounded him. When the music finally stopped, they remained standing close together, neither quite ready to break the spell. The sound of a throat clearing brought them back to reality. "Beautiful evening for stargazing," Zachariah commented, deliberately looking upward. "Martha and I often walk down to the pond this time of night. Very peaceful." Martha swatted her husband's arm lightly but didn't contradict him. "We'll be back in about an hour. Don't wait up if you're tired." As the older couple strolled away, Zara felt a blush rising to her cheeks. Their matchmaking efforts were far from subtle. "Your hosts aren't particularly discreet," Heath commented, amusement evident in his voice. "They mean well." Zara moved to the porch railing, looking out at the star-filled sky. "It is beautiful tonight." Heath came to stand beside her, his shoulder almost touching hers. "Reminds me of nights on the trail. No matter how difficult the day had been, the stars always gave perspective, made human troubles seem smaller somehow. Do you ever wish for a different life, one with more permanence?" Heath considered the question. "Sometimes, especially on cold nights in unfamiliar towns or when I see families together, children playing." He looked down at his hands, resting on the railing. "But then I remember that my work matters. That occasionally I help bring justice to those who'd otherwise never see it, like me." He turned to face her. "You would have found a way with or without me. You're remarkably determined. Stubborn, my father called it." Zara smiled at the memory. "A quality I've come to admire," Heath said softly. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken emotions. Heath's gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes, a question in his expression. Zara wasn't sure who moved first, but suddenly his mouth was on hers, gentle at first, then with increasing urgency as she responded. His hands cradled her face with exquisite tenderness, while hers gripped the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Heath rested his forehead against hers. "I shouldn't have done that," he murmured, though he made no move to release her. "Why not?" "Because it complicates things, because my life doesn't allow for." He trailed off. "For what feelings?" "Connection." Zara pulled back slightly to look into his eyes. "Is that really a choice we make, Heath?" He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather light. "I've spent years keeping people at a distance. It's safer that way for them and for me. And how has that worked out for you?" "Are you happy?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "Happiness wasn't something I considered relevant. Everyone deserves happiness, Heath, even wandering Pinkerton detectives." He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his face. "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is. Maybe we're the ones who complicate it." Heath studied her face for a long moment, as if memorizing every detail. Then he kissed her again, more deeply this time, his arms encircling her waist to draw her closer. "Zara Blackwood," he whispered against her lips, "you may be the most dangerous person I've ever encountered." She laughed softly. "Because I challenged your carefully constructed solitude. Because you make me want things I convinced myself I could live without." The sound of approaching footsteps caused them to step apart. A ranch hand appeared at the edge of the porch, his expression urgent. "Mr. Jackson back yet?" he asked, looking around. "They went for a walk," Heath answered, immediately alert. "What's happened?" "Riders coming. 6, maybe 7 of them, armed." The man was breathless. "Saw them from the north ridge. They'll be here in 20 minutes, maybe less." Heath's expression hardened. Get inside, wake anyone sleeping, tell them to arm themselves. As the hand rushed off, Heath turned to Zara. Get your things. We need to move quickly. Zara hurried to their room, heart pounding. She had barely gathered their few possessions when Heath appeared with a rifle and extra ammunition. Here, he said, handing her a small revolver. Do you know how to use this? Father taught me. Said a woman alone should know how to protect herself. Heath nodded approvingly. Stay close to me. We're going out the back way. They moved swiftly through the house, finding Martha and Zachariah already returning, having been warned by another ranch hand. You can't stay, Jackson said grimly. They must have tracked you somehow. We can't lead them to you either, Heath replied. These men won't hesitate to harm anyone helping us. Nonsense, Martha said firmly. We're not abandoning you now. Zach, get the wagon ready, Jackson nodded. There's an old line shack about 15 miles west in the foothills. Remote, defensible. We can get you there before they realize you've gone. The ranch hands will delay them, Martha added, already packing food supplies. Tell them we saw riders heading east toward Carson's Pass. Heath hesitated only briefly before nodding. Thank you, both of you. Within minutes, they were in a wagon covered with hay, with Jackson driving and Martha beside him, looking for all the world like a farming couple returning from a late delivery. They left through a back trail just as the sound of approaching horses reached the main house. The journey was tense, every unusual sound causing them to freeze in their hiding place beneath the hay. When they finally reached the line shack, it was well past midnight. The small structure was basic but solid, with a stone fireplace, a narrow cot, and minimal furnishings. It ain't much, Jackson said, helping them unload their supplies, but it's well hidden. Creek nearby for water, enough firewood stacked out back to last a week if you're careful. We can't thank you enough, Zara said, embracing Martha. You just stay safe, the older woman replied. That marshal will be here soon and this nightmare will end. After the Jacksons departed, promising to send word when the marshal arrived, Heath secured the shack's single door and small window. The space felt even smaller with just the two of them. You should take the cot, Heath said, arranging his bedroll on the floor. Heath, Zara said quietly, I think we're past such formalities, don't you? He looked up, his expression unreadable in the dim light of the single lantern. What are you suggesting, Zara? Only that there's no need for you to sleep on the floor when the cot can accommodate both of us. Nothing more, she paused. Unless you want it to be more. Heath stood slowly, moving toward her with deliberate steps. What I want, he said, his voice low, and what's wise aren't necessarily the same thing. Wisdom is overrated, Zara whispered as he stopped before her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Is that so? His hand came up to cradle her cheek. Love makes fools of us all, she said, leaning into his touch. The cowboy replied, his voice husky with emotion, then I've never wanted to be wiser. His kiss was different this time, hungrier, more demanding. Zara responded with equal fervor, her hands exploring the broad expanse of his shoulders, the solid strength of his chest. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Are you sure? Heath asked, his eyes searching hers. Once we cross this line. I've never been more certain of anything, Zara answered, drawing him toward the cot. The night passed in a haze of discovery and passion, each touch, each kiss revealing new facets of their growing connection. In Heath's arms, Zara found a sense of belonging she hadn't known she was missing. And in her embrace, Heath rediscovered parts of himself long buried beneath years of solitude and duty. As dawn approached, they lay entwined, Zara's head resting on Heath's chest, his fingers gently stroking her hair. What happens when this is over? She asked softly. When the marshal arrives and Harrington is brought to justice, Heath was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. I've never allowed myself to think beyond the current assignment. Zara propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. And now. He traced the curve of her cheek with his finger. Now I find myself contemplating possibilities I never considered before, such as, a small smile played at his lips, such as whether Silver Creek needs a lawman with actual integrity, or whether the Pinkerton agency might value an operative who remains in one location, monitoring activities in this region. Hope bloomed in Zara's chest. Are you saying you might stay? I'm saying I might have found something worth staying for. His expression grew serious. But Zara, my life has never been safe or predictable. I can't promise, she silenced him with a finger to his lips. I'm not asking for promises, just possibilities. He captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Possibilities I can offer. They spent the next 2 days in a strange, suspended reality. Outside their hidden shelter, danger still lurked, but within its walls, they created their own world, talking for hours about their pasts, their hopes, their fears, sharing simple meals prepared over the small fire, reading aloud from a dog-eared book of poetry left behind by some previous occupant. On the morning of the 3rd day, they heard approaching horses. Heath immediately positioned himself by the window, rifle ready, while Zara took up position near the door with the revolver. 2 riders, Heath reported, tension evident in his stance. Wait, it's Jackson. And someone in a marshal's coat. Relief flooded through Zara as Heath opened the door to greet their visitors. The marshal, a stern-faced man named Howard Buchanan, wasted no time with pleasantries. I've reviewed your evidence, Miss Blackwood, along with Mr. Calloway's reports. Combined with statements we've gathered from other affected ranchers, we have enough to arrest Judge Harrington and Sheriff Tanner. He handed Heath an official-looking document. This is a federal warrant. I'd like you to accompany me back to Silver Creek to execute it. What about Zara? Heath asked. Her safety will be guaranteed, the marshal assured him. I've brought 6 deputies with me. They're waiting at the Jackson Ranch. The ride back to Silver Creek was tense but uneventful. True to his word, Marshal Buchanan had brought significant reinforcement. The arrests themselves were almost anticlimactic. Judge Harrington surrendered without resistance when confronted at his home, while Sheriff Tanner attempted to flee but was quickly apprehended by Heath and 2 deputies. As they stood outside the jail where Harrington and Tanner were now confined, Zara felt a strange mixture of triumph and uncertainty. Justice had been served, her father's death at least partially avenged, but what now? Heath seemed to sense her thoughts. Walk with me, he asked, offering his arm. They strolled through the town, drawing curious glances from citizens who had heard rumors of the arrests but weren't yet privy to the full story. Marshal Buchanan wants me to stay for the trials, Heath said as they reached the edge of town. Could be several weeks, possibly months. I see. Zara tried to keep her tone neutral, and after that, Heath stopped, turning to face her. After that depends largely on you, on me. I spoke with my superiors by telegraph this morning. They've been considering establishing a permanent presence in this region given the increasing reports of corruption and land fraud. He took a deep breath. They've offered me the position. Hope surged through Zara, but she tempered it with caution. Would you want that? To stay in one place after years of roaming, a week ago, I would have declined without hesitation. His eyes held her steadily. But circumstances have changed. I've changed. Because of me. Zara's voice was barely above a whisper. Because of us, Heath corrected gently. Zara, I can't promise that life with me would be easy or always safe. My work will still involve risks, still take me away sometimes, but I can promise that I would always return, that Silver Creek would be home base. He took her hands in his. If that's something you might consider. Zara felt tears welling in her eyes. Are you proposing, Mr. Calloway? A smile spread across his face. Not yet, Miss Blackwood. I believe proper courtship comes first, but I am proposing a beginning. A beginning, she repeated, returning his smile. I think I'd like that very much. 6 months later, Silver Creek had transformed. With Judge Harrington and Sheriff Tanner awaiting trial in Denver, a new judge and sheriff had been appointed, both men of integrity recommended by Marshal Buchanan. The ranchers who had been forced from their land were being compensated, and Harrington Mining Company had been dissolved, its assets seized by the federal government. The Silver Creek Chronicle, under Zara's leadership, was thriving. Her fearless reporting of the corruption scandal had earned the newspaper respect throughout the territory, and circulation had doubled. She had hired 2 assistants to help with the increased workload, allowing her more time for investigative pieces and for Heath. True to his word, Heath had accepted the position as the Pinkerton agency's regional representative. He maintained an office above the barber shop, though he spent considerable time traveling to nearby communities when his services were needed. As promised, he always returned to Silver Creek to Zara. Their courtship had progressed under the watchful and approving eyes of the townspeople. Heath had proven himself a man of his word, respectful of Zara's independence while making his devotion clear in countless small ways, accompanying her to church on Sundays, bringing her wildflowers collected during his travels, spending evenings in earnest discussion of books they both enjoyed. On a crisp autumn evening, Heath invited Zara for a ride outside of town. He led her to a beautiful overlook where the setting sun painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson. "I brought you here for a reason," he said as they dismounted. "I assumed it wasn't just for the view, magnificent as it is," Zara replied with a smile. Heath took her hands in his. "Zara Blackwood, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me that there's more to living than mere survival, more to purpose than just doing a job." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Zara's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I love you, Zara. Your strength, your determination, your compassion. I want to build a life with you, to face whatever comes good or bad together." He dropped to one knee. "Will you marry me?" Tears of joy spilled down Zara's cheeks. "Yes, Heath Calloway. Yes, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, Zara remembered their conversation from that first night in the lined shack. Love had indeed made fools of them both, but as Heath had said, neither had ever wanted to be wiser. Their wedding took place the following spring in Silver Creek's small church, decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Martha and Zachariah Jackson were guests of honor, beaming with satisfaction at the union they had helped facilitate. Marshall Buchanan attended as well, along with several of Heath's Pinkerton colleagues, and what seemed like the entire population of Silver Creek. As they exchanged vows, Zara thought of how fate had brought them together, a crusading newspaperwoman and a wandering detective, united by a quest for justice that had blossomed into something neither had been looking for, but both had desperately needed. The reception was held in the town square, with tables laden with food contributed by well-wishers, music provided by local musicians, and dancing that continued well into the night. When Heath swept Zara into a waltz, reminiscent of their first dance on the Jacksons' porch, the crowd cleared a space for them, watching with approving smiles. "Happy Mrs. Calloway," Heath murmured as they moved gracefully across the makeshift dance floor. "Completely, Mr. Calloway," Zara replied, her eyes shining. "Though I'm keeping Blackwood for the newspaper," Heath chuckled. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As the celebration continued around them, Zara and Heath slipped away, walking hand in hand toward their new home, a cozy cottage on the edge of town that they had purchased together. It represented everything their future held, a blend of their separate lives into something shared and precious. Standing on the porch in the moonlight, Heath pulled Zara into his arms. "You know, when I rode into Silver Creek that day, I never imagined I'd find not just a case to solve, but a reason to stay. And I never imagined that the mysterious stranger who came to my rescue would become the man I couldn't imagine living without," Zara replied, reaching up to touch his face tenderly. "Love makes fools of us all," Heath quoted softly. Zara smiled, completing their private motto, "Then I've never wanted to be wiser." Their kiss sealed not just their wedding day, but the promise of all the days to come, days of challenge and triumph, joy and occasionally sorrow, but always faced together, with the strength of a love that had begun in danger but would flourish in peace. 2 years later, Heath returned from a 3-day journey to find Zara waiting for him on their porch, her face glowing with a secret joy. "Welcome home," she said, rising to meet him as he tied his horse to the hitching post. Heath gathered her in his arms, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "The best part of traveling is always coming back to you." "I have news," Zara said, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. Heath pulled back to look at her, noting the special brightness in her eyes. "Good news, I hope. The very best." She took his hand and placed it gently against her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." The expression that crossed Heath's face, wonder mixed with joy and a touch of awe, was one Zara knew she would remember forever. He dropped to his knees, pressing his face against her middle, his arms encircling her waist. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." When he looked up at her, there were tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Zara. For everything, for believing in me, for choosing this life with me, and now for this most precious gift." As he rose to kiss her, Zara felt the familiar sensation of homecoming that Heath's presence always brought. Their journey together had only just begun, but already it had brought more happiness than either had dared to hope for. The months that followed were filled with preparation and anticipation. Heath took on fewer assignments that required travel, focusing instead on cases closer to home. Zara continued managing the newspaper, but delegated more responsibilities to her capable staff. Their cottage expanded to accommodate the coming addition, a nursery added to the back, painted in cheerful yellows and greens, since they had decided to be surprised by the baby's gender. Martha Jackson became a frequent visitor, bringing handmade baby clothes and dispensing practical advice about child-rearing with good-humored authority. On a snowy December night, after a labor that tested even Zara's considerable strength, their daughter entered the world with a robust cry that immediately captured her father's heart. They named her Hope, Elizabeth Calloway Hope, for the future they had built together, and Elizabeth after Heath's mother. Holding his tiny daughter for the first time, Heath experienced a love unlike anything he had known before, fierce, protective, and completely unconditional. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching her downy head. "She has your eyes," Zara observed tiredly from the bed, her face glowing despite her exhaustion. "And your determination, I think," Heath replied as the infant gripped his finger with surprising strength. "God help us when she starts talking." Life settled into a new rhythm, challenging but deeply fulfilling. Heath proved himself as devoted a father as he was a husband, never complaining about interrupted sleep or changing diapers. Zara found that motherhood, while demanding, added yet another dimension to her already rich life. The Silver Creek Chronicle continued to thrive under her part-time guidance. She had developed a particular interest in stories about women pioneers, publishing a popular series of interviews with female homesteaders, teachers, and entrepreneurs throughout the territory. Heath's reputation as a fair and effective investigator grew, leading to his promotion within the Pinkerton agency. The new position came with more responsibility, but also more flexibility to choose his cases, allowing him to maintain his promise of putting family first. On Hope's first birthday, they hosted a celebration at their home, now expanded again to include a larger kitchen and a proper dining room. Friends from throughout Silver Creek attended, bringing gifts and well wishes for the little girl who had become a favorite throughout the community. As twilight fell and the last guests departed, Heath and Zara sat on their porch swing, Hope sleeping peacefully in her father's arms. "Did you ever imagine this?" Zara asked, gesturing to their home, their sleeping daughter, the life they had built. "When you were traveling alone, taking on dangerous assignments, did you ever picture this future?" Heath considered the question. "No," he admitted. "I thought my path was set, that connection, family, permanence weren't meant for someone like me." He looked down at Hope, her tiny hand curled trustingly against his chest. "I've never been so happy to be proven wrong." Zara leaned her head against his shoulder. "When I think about how close we came to never meeting if you hadn't been assigned to investigate, if I hadn't stood up to Sheriff Tanner that day. I believe we were meant to find each other," Heath said simply. "Some things are just meant to be." "The wandering detective and the stubborn newspaper woman," Zara smiled. "Exactly." Heath shifted Hope gently to free one arm, which he wrapped around Zara's shoulders. Two people who thought they knew exactly what they wanted from life until fate showed them something better. As they sat together, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first desperate day when a stranger had come to her aid, through danger and revelation, courtship and marriage, to this peaceful evening with their child, every step had led them here. to a happiness neither had expected but both had embraced wholeheartedly. "Love makes fools of us all," she whispered, their personal motto now a cherished reminder of how their story began. Heath's arm tightened around her as he completed the phrase that had come to symbolize their journey. "Then I've never wanted to be wiser." And in that moment, with the woman he loved beside him and their child sleeping in his arms, Heath Calloway knew with absolute certainty that all his years of wandering had been leading him here not to a place, but to these people who had become his home. In the years that followed, Silver Creek grew and prospered. The railroad arrived, bringing new opportunities and challenges. Zara's newspaper expanded to include a weekly magazine section featuring stories from throughout the territory. Heath's work with the Pinkerton agency evolved to focus more on training new operatives, allowing him to travel less while still making meaningful contributions to justice. Their family grew as well. 2 years after Hope's birth, they welcomed a son, Joseph Heath, named for Zara's father and his own. The children thrived in the loving environment. Their parents created Hope, developing her mother's quick intelligence and love of words. Joseph showing early signs of his father's quiet strength and keen observational skills. Through it all, Heath and Zara remained devoted partners, their bond deepening with each passing year. They weathered the inevitable challenges of life illness, financial setbacks, occasional disagreements with the same determination and mutual respect that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Heath surprised Zara with a special gift, the deed to a small piece of land outside town, with a cabin overlooking the valley where he had proposed. "Our retreat," he explained as they explored the property. "Somewhere we can escape when the world gets too busy, where the children can run free, where we can always remember how it all began." Zara, deeply touched by his thoughtfulness, pulled a small package from her pocket. "My gift seems modest in comparison," she said, handing it to him. Inside, Heath found a silver pocket watch beautifully engraved. When he opened it, he discovered an inscription inside the cover. "Love makes fools of us all, then I've never wanted to be wiser. Forever yours, Z." "It's perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "just like the last 10 years. As they stood together, looking out over the land that had brought them together and now held their future, Heath reflected on the remarkable journey that had led him to this moment. From a solitary existence focused solely on duty and justice, he had found his way to a life rich with love, family, and purpose. And Zara, who had once defined herself primarily through her work and her father's legacy, had discovered that opening her heart hadn't diminished her strength or independence, but had instead revealed new dimensions of fulfillment and joy. Together, they had created something neither had imagined possible: a partnership of equals, a family bound by love, a legacy of integrity and compassion that would endure through their children and beyond. "What are you thinking?" Zara asked, noticing his contemplative expression. Heath smiled, drawing her close. "I'm thinking that being a fool for love has been the wisest decision of my life." As the sun set over the valley, painting the landscape in hues of gold and crimson, Heath and Zara sealed their 10th anniversary with a kiss that held all the passion of their first embrace and all the depth of a decade shared. Their journey had begun with danger and uncertainty, but had blossomed into a life neither would trade for all the wisdom in the world. In the end, it was as they had always known. Love had indeed made fools of them both, and neither had ever wanted to be wiser.